right, party people. So in today's video, what I really wanted to do is dive into 9, 10, maybe even 11 or 12 various handguns that I would actually buy in the year 2026. And the things that I really wanted to focus on in today's video is, number one, the value for performance for what you get for the money. And then I wanted to focus on modularity. Now, a caveat to this video, there is a lot of handgun platforms that have come out in the recent year and a half that I haven't tested before. So if you don't see one that you thought should be on today's list, just let me know what that is down in the comments section and I'll do my best to get it and review it so we can have it on the channel. Now, the first platform I want to talk about is slim subcompact pistols. The first one that I want to address is the Glock 43X. The main reason that I wanted to bring this up in today's video has to do with Glock introducing OEM standard capacity magazines and a very dire warning about this. That'll make more sense in a minute. This is a platform that when you first get it, it's not that great. But as you add some supporting enhancements to it, it can become a very good platform. For example, number one, the trigger on these is terrible from the factory. It is just atrociously heavy compared to other Glock platforms. A couple of ways that you can get around that is with some trigger enhancements. Some of my favorite are Overwatch Precision and Apex Tactical, but there's a lot of great ones out there. But that's not the biggest crux. One of the defining characteristics of a handgun platform for me that can actually make or break it on whether or not I'm proficient with it and good with it has got to be the grip texture. And unfortunately, the Glock 43X is lacking that tremendously. Now, there's a few ways that you can kind of get around the grip texture issue. You can get it stippled, you can throw grip tape on it, or you can do what I did and I put a magwell on it. And the magwell acts as a place for my pinky and it allows my hand to stay on it and give me a lot better control and accuracy. Also, one of the downsides to slim subcompact style platforms is got to be the recoil impulse with them. With this one, I've solved that using the Radian Ramjet Afterburner. I love these things to death. I put them on a lot of the platforms that I use, but that also reminds me, just so you guys are aware, I will have a complete gear sheet for absolutely everything that we're talking about. If you want to check that out, that's the first link in the description. I'll also pin that link in the comments section for you as well. Now, there is a warning that I really want to give you regarding the Glock 43X. And if you do this, it will ruin your platform completely. And I learned this the hard way. If you currently have a Glock 43X or a Glock 48 and you've been running the Shield Arms mags with the aluminum magazine release and you choose to get the OEM Glock mags that are standard capacity, do not, and I will say this, do not put your mag into that platform until you send the OEM magazine release. If you do, you will never get the magazine out without destroying something on your platform. I'll show you some B-roll footage up close. This is my Shield Arms aluminum magazine release. This was already in my Glock 43X when I picked up the OEM standard capacity magazines. And when I inserted the OEM magazine, it would not come out. Nothing I did would get it out. I tried hammering it out, nothing. Looked it up on Reddit, and the only way to get it out was to completely destroy the aluminum magazine release. It took me a couple of hours to get it all the way out, but the downside was I kind of boogered up my frame a little bit. I'll get that repaired. I'm gonna get this thing stippled anyway, but still, just be aware of that. Otherwise though, in my humble opinion, I really like the Glock 43X. However, because it's lacking in texture, because it's lacking in a good trigger, and because it's kind of snappy, you do have to do some aftermarket solutions to it to kind of make it work for you. Just be aware of its limitations. The next one on the docket that's also a slim subcompact style platform is the PSA Dagger. Specifically, this one is the Micro Dagger. And this one I've had for a little over 2 years now, and I've been testing it with both the standard slide, and they also have an integrally compensated slide as well. Now, the great thing about these is, number one, they are basically a Glock 43X, but they're a heck of a lot cheaper. Now, although the PSA Micro Dagger is much more affordable than a Glock 43X or a Glock 48, it actually has some features that are far superior. Number one is frame texturing. It has a ton of frame texturing. And what's cool about these, they do have the frames separate. And if you currently had a Glock 43X or a Glock 48, you could simply upgrade your frame, have better texture without actually having to have your platform stippled. and that's really cool. There's also an option from SCT Manufacturing. Now, I don't currently have their Glock 43X version, but I do have their Glock 19 version. And I will say, best bang for the buck. I love the SCT frame so much. I do need to get one for the 43X, but I don't have them. But I will have a lot more information at the gear sheet in case you're wanting to learn more information about it. The other way that the PSA Micro Dagger is superior to the Glock 43X is these have been coming with standard capacity mags since they came out. Now, a word of caution. Number one, in my experience with the PSA Micro Dagger, it's been completely reliable. However, many people have reported because the floor plate of the magazine is so thin that over time it will start bowing out. And when that happens, it will start inducing some problems into the reliability. The only way to really solve that is to get a different metal floor plate. However, there is good news. The new standard capacity OEM Glock mags also work with the PSA Micro Dagger. These also come with an RMSC footprint for the Optic, and they have a ton of different configurations and options and colors and stuff that people can choose from. When it comes to the standard Micro Dagger versus the compensated one, I will say I noticed a little bit of a difference between the compensated and the non-compensated version. However, the difference I saw between the two wasn't as great as the difference that I saw with the Radian Ramjet. With that said, however, getting these with the compensated slide is a heck of a lot cheaper than getting a Radian Ramjet. So just gonna put that out there for you. Moving on to the next one. Don't pay attention to all the enhancements I've done to it, but this is gonna be my favorite, but the downside to this one is it's also the most expensive. The P365X Macro. I have made numerous videos reviewing this one in various configurations. And something you'll notice, this one looks kind of odd, right? Well, before we get to what all's on here, let's talk about these real quick. So the X Macro was literally the first subcompact that came out that had standard capacity. And not only did it have standard capacity like 15, it had standard capacity of 17 in a very small package. These come in a few different configurations. They can be had as a comped version or a non-comped version. Totally up to the end user which one to get. Now, I personally had picked up the comped version, and then over the years, I picked up various aftermarket enhancements and factory enhancements, and now we have this. Here's the pros of this guy. Yes, it has the Shield RMS footprint, but this one has, without a doubt, between the first two that we've talked about so far, the best trigger, the best control, and the best recoil management of all the others that we've talked about so far. It did have cons. I did not like the factory texture on it, but it was enough to get me by. The compensator on it definitely helped recoil management. Love that to death. However, over the years, I started experimenting with different frames. I tested out the Icarus Precision aluminum frame that came out years ago. Then I tested their polymer frame that came out years ago. And now we have this one. I believe this one is called the 311 frame. And it's essentially, if you compare it, it's actually reminiscent of a 2011 grip style. It's very fascinating and it's a ton of fun to actually use at the range. I've always loved their stuff. The downside to them is they're kind of pricey, but the good side is it's actually worth it. I will have more information about all that stuff over at the gear sheet in case you're interested in learning. The biggest downside to the P365X Macro comes down to the price. Although they're more pricey out of the box, they don't need as much aftermarket enhancements or factory enhancements to make them super comfortable and to make them run really well. Trigger is the best trigger out of the box. Recoil management is the best out of the box. The grip texture is better than the Glock 43X, but not better than the PSA Dagger. So keep that in mind. So now let's move to some platforms that are relatively new, at least in the past 12 to 13 months. First one I want to talk about, the CZ P10C Ported and the CZ P10C Ported Koa Edition. Now, I first got the CZ P10C Ported last year around this time. And I will say, one of the things that I love about the CZs in particular, when it comes to optics ready platforms, they're one of the more affordable ones that are also super reliable. The downside is everything has trade-offs. Number one trade-off with the CZ P10s is they don't include any types of optic mounting plates in the box. You have to pick that stuff up separately. Those are usually anywhere from 50 to 100. And the reason that's an kind of a bummer is if you were to want to pick one of these up, mount an optic to it, there's going to be additional cost involved beyond just the optic when you compare it to other platforms that are very similar. The other downside to these is I don't like the grip texture of these when compared to comparable platforms. It's not that the grip texture is bad, it's just there isn't enough of it in the right areas. The other downside that I don't particularly like about the CZ-P10C in particular is I will say on the ported version, they did add taller sights, but depending on the optic that you choose, you may or may not be able to co-witness with it. Now, I will say this, I love the way that this thing runs at the range. It's run incredibly well. I've had zero malfunctions with it, and it's one of the flattest cycling platforms that I've tested in a long time, especially from the factory. But then recently they came out with this guy. It's essentially the same exact thing. The main things that are different between this version and the first version is number one, they got a gray frame, and then it has the koa. Now here's something that's kind of interesting. When they released this, I saw two different photos floating around on the interwebs. Number one was this one, and the second one was this one. And you'll notice the second one has a magwell. And I don't think CZ has ever offered the P10 with a factory magwell. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And when they sent this for me to test and review, this isn't gonna be the full review of this. I will have that coming. So make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you can see the full review of this one. But I will say this, I was trying to find out who made that magwell and I was gonna go kind of try to pick one up for myself. The biggest downside to the CZ-P10C in this regards, magwells require different base plates for the magazines because the way that the grip is designed. And I noticed when I started researching more into their factory magwell option, all of the mags had lower profile base plates. The downside is that version with the factory magwell currently isn't available in the US market. It's only available overseas. And so I actually picked up this magwell here and these base plates right here. And I'll have information about those at the gear sheet in case you want to learn more about them. But they work really well. I love them. They really enhance my grip on here. Although I haven't personally taken this one to the range yet, it literally just arrived about a week ago. I can already tell by looking at it that it's going to perform just like this one with the Aimpoint koa on it. Now, speaking of the Aimpoint koa, that is a footprint that is widely becoming very popular, and most manufacturers are starting to manufacture their platforms that come with a bundle of the Aimpoint koa and the Aimpoint koa compatible slide. If you look at the top down on the way that these mount, in case you're not familiar, they kind of dovetail into place, and then they're secured down with a plate in the back with very robust screws. And I think that this possibly could become the new default optics footprint because it's one of the most secure that I've ever seen. And I really like the koa, which we'll talk more about towards the end of the video because this video is not about optics, but I did want to mention something about it later. Now, speaking of koa, that brings me to the next platform that has come out in the past year or so, and that's going to be the Gen 6 Glock. Specifically, this one is the Gen 6 Glock 19. I've made a complete video on this, completely dedicated to what are the differences between the Gen 6 and the Gen 5, and what are the compatibility of the parts between them. So if you want to watch that, just feel free to search my channel. Just type in Glock Gen 6, you'll find it. Couple things I love about this. Number one, the Gen 6 grip texture is insanely miles ahead better than they ever have been in the past. Not only do we have accelerator cuts up here for your thumb, but the grip texture and the ergos are actually really good. They don't feel blocky like they used to, but they also don't feel rounded like a lot of the other platforms. So it's kind of like this hybrid. And they also gave it some interesting ergos on the side of the grip as well. They also changed up the MOS system so that it's a little bit better than the old MOS system. They also changed up the trigger. Downsides about this is I still didn't like the factory trigger as much as I did the factory Gen 5 triggers. I felt that the factory Gen 5 triggers were much more consistent, where I found that the OEM triggers on these are a little bit inconsistent. One of my buddies got one that pulled at about 6.5 pounds. Mine pulled at about 4.5 pounds, and I've seen a lot of mixed results from people on the interwebs. For me personally, I decided to kind of just throw an Apex in there. And then I actually am using a Gen 5 magwell on mine. Not all Gen 5 magwells work, but this one does, which I'll have more detailed information about at the gear sheet in case you're wanting to learn about that. Now, Why did I say, speaking of Kowa? Well, the good news is Glock also has a Kowa version of most of their platforms available as well. And one of the benefits to the bundle of the platform with the Kowa is it comes out a heck of a lot cheaper than getting a platform and getting a Kowa separately. On here, I do have a Gideon RMSC footprint red dot. After I do some more testing with the P10C Kowa, this one could replace the Gen 6 as my daily carry, but I will have a video coming on that in the near future on which one I decide to go with. Now, I promise this will be the last Glock style platform that we talk about in today's video, but that is gonna be this guy, the Ruger RXM. Obviously, this one doesn't look like an RXM. I had it looking like this for a specific reason. One of the greatest things about the RXM is it's now a modular platform, but not modular to the extent of other platforms like the Springfield Echelon, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or the SIG P365 and stuff like that. But it's still a pretty good platform. They have different frame sizes that people can pick up and customize it to fit them better. Now, this one in particular has the Icarus Precision grip on it. I actually requested black. I don't know why I got this color, but hey, that's what I got. The reason I bring that up is prior to the RXM coming out, the only modular Glock style platform that was available was this guy, was the Zev OZ9. But the coolest thing about the RXM is they're kind of like a Zev OZ9 for a third of the price, which is kind of cool. So with this one, honestly, the only thing I've changed on here is the frame, and it looks and feels and runs like a completely different animal. I'll throw up the footage of this right now. I like the RXM, especially for the value for what you get. And there's no other modular platform that I know of that's available that gives you this much for the money. And so I did a dedicated video on this if you want to do a deep dive on the RXM, but they have these available as a Glock 17 size, a Glock 19X size, a Glock 19 size, and they even have a Glock 26 style grip that's really short for the Glock 26 mags, but it fits on the Glock 19 slide. So that's kind of interesting. I haven't tested that yet, but I'm really hoping to in the future. But these are proven to me to be very reliable. However, there are some reliability problems that people have ran into regarding the firing pins breaking, but then they replaced them with OEM and never had another problem. I think they got that sorted out. That was a problem when they first launched. Now, the next platform that I really wanted to talk about in today's video isn't new by any stretch of the imagination, but there are some features about it that are kind of new in the past 12 to 13 months. And that's gonna be the M&P 2.0 or the M&P Metal. Now, I have made numerous videos about the M&P and the M&P Metal. Cliff's notes about this because there is a warning about this. I love the M&P 2.0, regardless if it's the full size, the compact, or what have you. The M&P Metal I wanted to love, but I don't love it in function. And I'm gonna break it down for you real fast so you don't gotta go watch another video. Number one of the reasons why polymer as a frame material works really well is it has frame flex, and that absorbs a lot of the felt recoil when the slide is reciprocating. When you make an aluminum grip, that adds rigidity to the frame, but because the grip's not made of steel, it doesn't add any additional weight. And one of the reasons why steel platforms feel so much better and easier to run is because of that additional weight. And the thing that I noticed with the metal 2.0s is number one, they're almost double the price of the polymers. And two, there was no real world benefit. Now, I will say, the newer ones that have come out with the different colors, like the black and stuff like that, they're beautiful. But functionally, I just don't like them. The reason I even bring all this up is in the past year, Smith & Wesson has introduced their carry comp style platforms. And now, not only that, but they're also offering the slides separately from the frames. And what that means is, if you currently have an M&P 2.0, you can go get the comp slide without having to shell out for a whole new platform. And the reason that's important is some of their carry comp models come on the M&P metal frame, and some of them come on the polymer frame. I simply picked up this slide separately and I threw it on my existing M&P 2.0, and this thing runs amazingly well. Had zero issues with it. They come in multiple colors, but this is one of my favorites because number one, these are truly modular optics. They come with all the different plates in the box, and they include some of the best grip texture The only downside is they don't have any ledge support on the side, but these have always been one of the best values for me because with their non-comp versions, they were in the 400s and you could do a lot with them. Now, similar to that of Glock and the CZ, these do have a lot of factory support and aftermarket support. And as you can see on this one, I also have a magwell. The downside to this particular magwell is they do require an aftermarket base plate to work. With the M&P platform, there are tons of aftermarket solutions, especially for the trigger. There's T.A.M.S, you have Apex Tactical, and you have Overwatch Precision. With that said, although I love those, their new factory triggers are way better than their older style hinge triggers that they've had in the previous years. And they're so good, in fact, that I don't feel the need to even change it. Although the Apex and all them are better, this one's good enough to get me by, and I don't feel the need to swap it out. So that's always a pro. So let's move on to a different style platform known as the single action, double action hammer platform. Both of these have came out in the past year or so, and both of these are pretty awesome. So the first one I want to talk about is the P09 Nocturne. This one specifically is the Nocturne C compact version. In my in-depth review that I did with this, I compared it a lot to my original CZ P07. And this is leaps and bounds, in my humble opinion, in performance, in the way that it feels, and everything beyond the original P07. Some people disagree, but my original CZ P07 just had atrocious trigger in it. No matter what we upgraded on it, nothing was helping it. In this one, at least, the trigger was very manageable. I forget exactly what the weight was, but if you want to learn more about that, go to my full in-depth review. Biggest takeaways from this: hugely improved ergonomics and grip texture on here with thumb support. Heck of a lot more serrations on the front for racking the slide or press checking. They are now optics ready with optic height sights. It is an RMSC platform only, and it feels phenomenal. I don't even feel the need to change anything or upgrade anything on this at the range. Now, little caveat, I'm not the biggest hammer-fired person, especially when it comes to concealed carry. It's just something I haven't really trained with enough to be proficient and comfortable to carry it. However, if I was going to, this would be one that I would consider. Love it to death. The next one's also a CZ, and this is the Shadow 2 Carry. Now, in my video that I made about this, I kind of went a little hard on CZ for their CZ Shadow 2 Compact and Carry compared to the original CZ Shadow 2. I will say, as I've put more rounds through this, my mind has changed a little bit, and this is what I mean. So this is the original CZ Shadow 2. This one I've had upgraded and customized and all that cool stuff. And these things run amazingly well. They're super easy to run at the range, and it's almost like a cheat code because there's cycles so incredibly flat without any comps or ports. So when CZ first announced the Shadow 2 Compact, I assumed it was going to be just like that one, just in a smaller form factor. It wasn't. The biggest difference, aside from the length of these, is these frames are made of aluminum and this frame is made of steel. Now, I understand why they did that because it's lighter, it's easier to carry with. However, it really affected the performance of the cycling and the recoil management at the range. Not that they're not reliable, it's just they were more snappy than I anticipated for an all-metal platform. And that really disappointed me. And the biggest disappointment that I had in the compact version was they didn't include a firing pin block. And what I mean by that is with the standard Shadow 2 and with the Shadow 2 Carry, they didn't have a way to actually decock it in a very safe manner. And the problem with that is if you wanted to carry with it, you had to rack it to get a round in the chamber, but then you had to figure out how to drop the hammer if you wanted to carry it in double action mode. If you didn't want to carry it in double action mode, you were just forced to turn on the safety and remember to disengage a safety when you draw. Thing that I loved about the Shadow 2 Carry was that they actually added that decocker and they added the firing pin block. So now these are very easy to carry. So how has my mind changed about this? So not only do they come with the RMSC footprint, not only do they come with the optic height sights, not only do they have standard capacity, a Picatinny rail, all that good stuff, and an amazing trigger in them, I started noticing as I went to the range and I started really running this through its paces after I published my video, that I realized that although this is called a Shadow 2, it was never intended to be a Shadow 2 like that one. And so once I started appreciating this for what it was, this is my all-time favorite of the compact shadows is the carry, not the compact. Downside to these is these are on the pricey side. The good news of the P09 and this is, I'll be real with you guys, at the range, I can't really feel much of a difference in the trigger and in the recoil impulse. And these are a heck of a lot more affordable than the Shadow 2. Now, since we're on the topic of hammer fire platforms, let's talk about double stack 1911s or 2011s. There is a lot of them that have come out in the past year or so that I simply haven't had a chance to get my hands on. So I'm just not gonna talk about stuff that I haven't experienced. So if I wanted to choose a semi-affordable double stack 1911 platform or 2011 that I think is actually worth it, that gives you a lot, it would be the Springfield Prodigy. Now, I have two of them and they look completely different, and we'll talk about why in a second. So Springfield Prodigy came out back in 2022, I believe. Over the years, they have added a lot to their lineup. They have the full size, which is the 5-inch model. They have the commander size, which is the 4¼ inch model. They've included new colors like flat dark earth and black. They also now have new ported versions, which I have not tested yet, but I will. But one of the things that I really liked about the Springfield Prodigy has got to be, they've been incredibly reliable for me. There are good upgrades that you can do to them. One of the best upgrades that I found that you could do to this is essentially an upgraded sear, disconnector, stuff like that. I'll have information about some of my favorite stuff at the gear sheet. That way you can learn and read about it and stuff. But this one I had completely overhauled. Let me show you real quick what I did. So number one, it's just Cerakoted into like a burnt bronze. I put in a different trigger. I changed out this grip, and then I had the barrel crowned. The grip that I have on here is Icarus Precision. They actually make the 2011 grips for the Terran Tactical stuff. So the cool thing is, if you went to Terran Tactical, they're crazy expensive. Go to Icarus Precision, they're not so much. There was a little bit of finagling I had to do to make it work right, but some of my favorite things about the Springfield Prodigy in general is I feel like they're kind of like the Glock of 2011s. They're cheap enough so people can get into them, but they aren't so cheap where you kind of have to worry about reliability. Now, when they first launched, they had some issues, but that tends to be a problem with most manufacturers. When they launch, there's some issues, they get them sorted out, and then they don't have any issues. Modular optics from the factory. Downside is, I think they only include one plate, and then if you want a different plate, you have to get that aftermarket. I like the fact that their plates include backup irons from the factory. You don't have to get that separately. I like the fact that these can either use Prodigy magazines or you can use staccato magazines with them. I love them to death, and they run absolutely amazing at the range. They're easy to run, and honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of carrying 1911s or 2011s. However, if I was going to, I would definitely carry one of these because they're affordable enough that you can afford to lose it, yet they're not cheap enough where you got to worry about reliability. Now, since we're talking about Springfield Armory, I can't talk about them without mentioning the Springfield Echelon. These came out a couple of years ago as well, and this is a platform that I did not expect to like. They have a very advanced modular optic system, which I love, that doesn't require any plates. It uses a pin system, which I'll throw up a diagram so you can see that. The cool thing about that is the optic is mounted so low that you can co-witness with the factory sights. And the cool thing is that I loved about these is they're modular, just like the SIG P365, P320, stuff like that. The other thing I love about this is incredible grip texture, as well as thumb support from the factory. Really good trigger from the factory as well. The downside to these, it took them a long time to come out with factory options to actually support the modularity of these. Because these use an FCU, very similar to that of a P365, the cool thing is the slides and the frame sizes can be interchanged. And the downside is for the first couple of years, you could only get different frames, but you couldn't get different factory slides. However, that has been changed in the past year, and I have a few coming in. One of the first frames that I tried out was this guy from Icarus Precision. It is a metal frame, and it's very similar to that of their P365 frame. This one, I will say, they do have a magwell available for these. However, I will say this, the magwell does interfere with some of the base plates. Again, The bane of my existence is some of these platforms just don't play nice with mag wells. I don't know why, but the frame itself is amazing. It performs just as good as the Icarus frames did on the RXM, the Icarus frame on the OZ9, the Icarus frame on the P365, so on and so forth. And I've actually ordered a couple of different slides because they do have these available in multiple sizes now. They have, this is the full size, they have the compact, they also have a compact ported, they have a full size ported. And so I do have a few of those coming in. That way we can do a whole dedicated video to this guy. But the thing I love about this is they're not as expensive as the P365s. However, now, because of all the new factory support that has come out, you get all the same options as a P365 for a lower price. And I like these a lot, and they run incredibly well, and they've been very, very reliable in my experience. Now, earlier in the video, I promised I'd give you some more info about this Aimpoint Koa. Here's the thing I've noticed. Although I haven't taken this one to the range yet, I have tested others at the range. The reason I bring this up is I made a video back in December about some of my favorite enclosed red dots. And honestly, when you start looking at the data from that video and how we looked at visual distortion and coloring and all that stuff, you're really surprised by the end of the video on which one's my favorite. It's not going to be the one that you think is going to be my favorite. It turns out to be my favorite. But this one right here, I'm going to have to make a follow-up to that video because this is the first high-end optic enclosed that I think compares and competes really well with the favorites that were from that video. And if you want to watch that video in its entirety, you can check that out right there because I go into a lot of detail. It's not based on anyone paying me money, it's just based on data. But until next time, guys, I love you.